Is Canada better than the United Kingdom?
Have you been wondering why more Canadians are headed to the UK while many Brits seem to be looking the other way? We took a trip across the pond to uncover the real reasons behind this intriguing trend.
In this video, we will compare the two countries to answer the question once and for all: is Canada better than the UK?
To do this, we will talk about different criteria and categories that are, in our view, important when considering a country that you want to live in. And as we go through these, we will give out points for each so that we can tell for sure which country is better.
Subjectively speaking, obviously. The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is an island nation located off the northwestern coast of mainland Europe. Despite its smaller landmass than Canada of approximately 240,000 square kilometers, the UK is densely populated, housing around 69 million people. This makes it one of the most populous countries in Europe.
Geographically, the UK is made up of 4 distinct countries: England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Each nation has its own unique landscapes and cultural identities.
England is the largest of the 4, characterized by its economic, cultural, and football hubs like London, Birmingham, Manchester, and Liverpool.
We've spent several days traveling across England 2 months ago, and we were absolutely impressed by how unique each city is, no matter how big or small. York in particular really stole our hearts.
Scotland is known for its dramatic highlands, very damn good whiskey, and stunning lochs. Edinburgh and Glasgow are most populated and are located just under 2 hours' drive from each other.
We absolutely fell in love with Scotland and its people.
Wales offers stunning coastlines and rugged mountains, along with their own distinct language, and Cardiff and Swansea as the largest city of the region.
Lastly, Northern Ireland is famous for its natural beauty, welcoming pubs, and beautiful Irish accent, with the largest city of Belfast and sprinkles of a ton of small villages all around.
Now, Canada is the second largest country in the world by land area. Despite its vast size, Canada has a relatively small population of about 41 million people, making it one of the least densely populated countries globally. It's rich in natural beauty, with majestic mountains, diverse wildlife, world's largest freshwater reserves in lakes, and lush forests.
Canada is divided into 10 provinces and 3 territories, each offering its own unique landscapes and cultural experiences. Vancouver and Barnaby are the biggest cities in British Columbia, which is known for its stunning Pacific coastline, the breathtaking Rocky Mountains, and the scenic national parks.
Alberta is home to the iconic Banff and Jasper national parks, with absolutely breathtaking landscapes of the Rockies. Calgary and Edmonton are known for their vibrant culture and a rapidly growing economy.
Moving further east, we've got the prairies of the Saskatchewan and Manitoba, known for their vast open spaces and agricultural industry. The cities of Saskatoon, Regina, and Winnipeg each have their unique history, character, and low-key are some of the most underrated cities in Canada when it comes to cost of living and proximity to points of interest, since it's literally placed in the heart of the continent.
Next, Ontario, Canada's most populous province, which hosts 5 out of Canada's 10 largest cities. This is where most action of Canada is concentrated.
Quebec is like a country of its own, with its own language and the most unique culture of North America. Montreal and Quebec City are the closest you will get to feeling a piece of Europe while on this continent.
The Atlantic provinces of New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland and Labrador are not that populated. Yet, with a rich maritime culture, stunning coastlines, and warm, welcoming communities. Cities like Halifax and St. John's offer a glimpse into Canada's settler beginnings and seafaring history.
And lastly, the Northern Territories, Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. These are characterized by their breathtaking landscape, indigenous cultures, and remote wilderness. The stunning northern lights and the vast Arctic tundra make this region truly unique and far less populated, with the largest city with just 20,000 population.
To sum this up, Canada is more vast and spread out. Traveling between cities is mostly possible with a car, while the UK is more concentrated. Public transit is well developed, moving around the country takes way less time.
Due to density of population, infrastructure there is developed much better in general too. Canada has 6 cities with a metro population over 1 million, while the UK only has 4. I do want to stress that according to the UK definition of metropolitan areas, they have well over 10 metros with 1 million population.
All that to say is that strictly from city selection standpoint, the UK has a lot more to offer in terms of different vibes and sizes of the city, while Canada's choice is rather limited if you are into city life.
Now, obviously, depending on your lifestyle, you might not appreciate any city in the UK or Canada, so take this ranking with a grain of salt.
For that reason, we're going to give Canada a score of 1 for diversity of cities and UK 2 for diversity and urban development.
Next, we've got housing. Housing is a challenge in both countries, but for different reasons.
Let's start with affordability. In Canada, housing costs are through the roof, especially in major cities like Toronto and Vancouver. Evaluating housing prices across major provinces in Canada, Toronto and Vancouver average sold price are well over $1 million.
But the moment that you get outside the large cities to something like Winnipeg or Edmonton, which are the 5th and the 6th largest cities in Canada, prices start to look a lot more reasonable. BC and Ontario are nearly double all the other provinces here.
Looking at the UK, we weren't able to find such a fancy graphic like this one we have in Canada. But here is what we've got from the Government of the UK report. And these are the numbers we translated into Canadian dollars.
Similarly to Canada, the UK real estate prices are the most expensive in the most populous areas, like London and the South East. Yet, these prices are way more reasonable than Toronto and Vancouver. The conversation about housing prices will be incomplete without talking about income and cost of living.
But before we do that, I wanted to highlight how different the housing crises are in both countries. To demonstrate that, I have a few numbers to show. These are the new housing starts in 2023. This is the number of new dwelling units being built to address housing shortages. Canada is building way more homes, but UK already has a lot more homes available, so it focuses on something else.
Both Canada and the UK are dealing with severe housing crisis. Canada, on one hand, is focusing on large-scale housing developments and mortgage reforms to accelerate new builds and help more people afford a home. At the same time, the UK is experiencing a significant decline in new builds and instead focuses on making more social housing available out of homes that are already built and available in the country.
Speaking of having more homes already there, when we were in the UK, we noticed that most of the homes and buildings that we've been to are old construction, with small doorways, tiny bathrooms, squeaky floors, and, as we were told, poor insulation. You can often hear people complain about mold issue in older buildings.
At the same time, when we think about a home in Canada, we typically assume several bedrooms, built-in washer and dryer, central AC and heating, and all that.
However, in the UK you don't always get that because older homes simply were not built with that in mind. But aren't they charming?
So, having said all that, we're gonna give Canada 1 point for novelty of units. Both Canada and the UK get a point for addressing the issue of the housing shortage. They have a different but both equally important approaches. And UK will also get an extra point for simply having a slightly lower housing prices relative to Canada.
I know what you're thinking. How does housing price compare to income? We'll talk about that next. So, these are the average household disposable incomes after tax in Canada and in the UK in 2023-22. With currency conversion in mind, the median income in the UK is actually 15% lower than in Canada. Now, these are median numbers, which means that half of the households make less and half of the households make more.
So how does that relate to housing affordability that we've just discussed? The good old rule of house buying states that ideally you want to buy a home that's not more than 3x of your annual salary. If you go above that, you're now stretching your own finances too far by buying a home.
So, with that logic in mind, these are the ideal home prices for a median household in both countries. Now, let's look at the real house prices.
I wonder how many years of full after-tax household income does it take to buy a home in each country? Let's take a look. So these are the numbers for the UK, and these are the numbers for Canada. I know you'll probably think that we're oversimplifying this, but looks like looking strictly on income and housing, Canada is actually more affordable. So Canada gets a point. UK gets none here.
Oh, but now you're thinking, but Anna, it's not about the income, it's about how much you have left over. Let's talk about that.
So there are a lot of ways to slice and dice the cost of living, and it's highly personal. You could be spending $100 every week on going out, or you could be investing it, or you drive versus taking public transit. There's just so many variables.
When we were in the UK, we definitely felt the pressure of the currency exchange. A British pound is 1.7 times of Canadian dollar. So nearly everything felt like double the price for us, especially in London. A simple latte from a local coffee shop would come up to nearly 10 Canadian dollars. It's outrageous.
So from personal impressions with a Canadian salary, the British prices felt really high.
Looking at the news, it feels like the Brits are experiencing about the same issues as us, if not more. We both struggle with inflation and overall rising cost of living.
British gas and energy costs have risen due to the conflict in Ukraine. They felt the effect of it way more than in Canada. Here, we're pretty lucky to have so far abundant energy resources. At the same time, both of our countries have seen a similar sharp increase in food and rent costs.
Looking through some of the costs of living comparison websites, there's not a clear winner in cost of living between the two. Looking at absolute numbers, it feels like Canada is a tiny bit cheaper.
Canadians seem to be paying more for groceries and rent, but less for transportation, entertainment, shopping, and daycare. But here's where it gets really interesting. If we factor in median income, which with the currency conversion is 15% lower than in Canada, Canada becomes a more clear winner in this cost of living battle.
So with that, we're going to give both Canada and the UK a point for cost of living. But we'll award a bonus point to Canada for a slightly better income to cost of living ratio.
I know that you're also probably thinking, but guys, where are you pulling all of these points and criteria from?
We're not just comparing these countries for fun. We are comparing it because we want to truly understand overall life conditions in each country, and we hope our video can help you make a better decision about your relocation as well. That is why we cannot not mention immigration.
Canada is famously welcoming to immigrants, with 25% of its population born outside the country. Immigration is key to Canada's growth and success, and the government has set up over 100 immigration programs to help new arrivals settle here.
Some might argue that the government has made it too easy to come here, so immigration have become a touchy subject for many, and it's entirely possible that it will become much harder to come to Canada.
Thanks to its immigration policy, Canada has become a melting pot of cultures, with Toronto being named the most multicultural city in the world. Looking across the pond, one of the biggest downsides of most immigrants in Europe is that you will always remain an immigrant there. You'll always be a second-class citizen.
But not in Canada. The country is super welcoming, and the process to assimilate in Canada is fairly straightforward if you have a smart head on your shoulders.
England also has a rich history of immigration, particularly from former Commonwealth countries and the rest of EU. But the political climate has shifted in the recent years. Brexit has made economic mobility harder, yet UK still somehow faced higher than usual number of humanitarian migration from Ukraine, Afghanistan, Syria, and Hong Kong, which has driven the fastest net population increase since the 1970s last year. Last year, UK's net migration numbers were nearly 700,000, which is more than Canada's immigration targets for the years to come.
While both countries are multicultural, Canada's immigration process is overall smoother, well-structured, focusing primarily on skilled immigration, and welcoming attitude of Canadians just makes it better.
Canada gets the point for immigration and multiculturalism.
Canada is a federal parliamentary constitutional monarchy. As part of the Commonwealth, it is led by a Prime Minister and recognizes King Charles III as the head of state. Canadian politics tends to be more centrist and stable, with 4 major political parties and less polarization than in some countries.
Hey.
The post-pandemic era has created a number of challenges that have put the current Prime Minister in a hot seat, and uncontrolled immigration, along with rising costs of living and foreign interference allegations, are not making the ruling party's case better.
United Kingdom is a unitary parliamentary constitutional monarchy with a ruling Prime Minister. The political landscape in the UK is more complex. Region separatism, the lasting effects of Brexit, and the current economic challenges create a more divisive atmosphere than in Canada. In the last 8 years, Britain has flipped 5 prime ministers. I'm all for rotation of power, but 5 ministers in 8 years is not a good sign.
Both countries have their strengths and their weaknesses, but I will take Canada's politics over Britain, so Canada gets the point here.
For now. Life expectancy in both countries is rather similar, except that the British folk gets a couple of extra months to enjoy tea and biscuits. Canada's universal healthcare system is in many parts inspired by the British National Health Service. There are stunning similarities between the two, and this also includes the healthcare crisis.
Both countries are trying to recover from COVID hit on the system, while struggling with medical staff shortages, staff burnout, long wait lists, and lack of funding to deliver appropriate healthcare to the most vulnerable individuals.
At the same time, the way the healthcare systems operate is slightly different in both countries. The UK system is funded through general taxation and is centralized under the NHS, who is in turn responsible for delivering healthcare services across all regions of the country, which oftentimes yields ineffective resource allocation that result in long waiting times and shortage of doctors.
Canada's healthcare, on the other hand, is funded via both provincial and federal taxation, but it's managed by each province individually, which allows for a more efficient operation than the centralized operating model of the NHS.
With the decentralization comes the variability of healthcare services. So, if you're in Quebec, for instance, you're screwed, but Alberta or Ontario healthcare fares a little bit better.
Having said all that, the UK has a more developed private healthcare system than Canada. So if you have to wait way too long, at least you could pay to see a doctor or get hospital admission sooner, which is not the case in Canada. In Canada, you just wait, or travel to the US or elsewhere for that matter.
Canada has recently been taking strides in privatizing some aspects of healthcare in some provinces, hoping to patch up the healthcare crisis without forcing us to pay more taxes. But healthcare privatization has been a highly controversial topic in this country, facing a lot of backlash. Time will tell how this will evolve.
Based on our research, I am tempted to say that healthcare situation in Canada is slightly better because of the way it's structured and how it's funded. But having an option to turn to private healthcare when you really need to can be a matter of life or death. So, Canada and UK both get 1 point here.
How about the weather though? When we were in Scotland, we got lucky with a couple of days of sunlight, but it was just a couple of days. It was generally cloudy, gloomy, and foggy. When we arrived in London, we pretty much did not see sun for the entire week there. And that was in the end of August.
This is just an example of what climate is like in the UK. If you look at the entire country, it's a collection of islands surrounded by water. So the UK gets abundant rainfall, frequent overcast, mild winters and cool summers, all due to its temperate oceanic climate.
Last year, UK reported 171 rainy days. That's nearly half of the year raining.
Canada, on the other hand, gets a little more climate diversity here. BC has a climate very similar to the UK, actually due to its proximity to the ocean, while the prairies experience hot summers and dry winters. Southern Ontario is the southmost part of Canada, so it gets to enjoy a pretty good blend of hot, warm, chill and cold. And the southernmost point in mainland Canada is at the same latitude as Rome. Quebec is up north, so it gets rougher and windier winters and very humid summers. Atlantic provinces' summers are quite similar to the UK, but winters are more rough.
The diversity of climate conditions in Canada also make Canada as a traveling country quite fascinating. You will pretty much get everything in Canada, from the oceans to the mountains and forests to hot sunny summers at the lake and even Arctic experiences. Many of these nearly untouched by human, so it's actually perfect for outdoors and nature lovers. With that, the distances for traveling in Canada are enormous. Traveling outside the country is expensive too. There are no proper low-costers like in Europe and a very poorly developed transit system.
The UK is more dense as a country and has a well-developed and moderately affordable rail system. Not without its own issues, but at least it exists. Since it's in Europe, traveling to other destinations is cheaper and flights are more frequent. The United Kingdom is less geographically diverse than Canada, but you do get the seaside, the gorgeous highlands and fjords. I noticed that the country is so developed that it's really rare to encounter wildlife around there. Even in the forests and highlands, I noticed that I didn't hear any birds singing, as I usually do here in suburbs in Canada. For instance, the Brits completely eliminated the wolf population back in the 18th century due to hunting and habitat loss. Every single corner of the country shows human presence. There is no wilderness.
So on these accounts, in this category, Canada gets a point for climate diversity and the untouched nature, while the UK gets the point for ease of travel. You might score this one differently based on your value system, or perhaps you're Dracula or Twilight descendant, so you just prefer to stay away from the sun, and that's okay, at which point you'll pretty much gonna fall in love with the UK climate.
When it comes to culture, both Canada and the UK have a special diverse heritages that reflect their unique histories.
Canada is a young country with a fascinating history of trade discovery and Indigenous traditions. The influence of Indigenous traditions, appreciation of the wilderness, and centuries of immigration created this big tapestry that makes up Canada's cultural fabric. This country is known for being cold, but it also knows how to survive and thrive in the cold through multiple winter festivals and activities and the renowned warm winter clothes.
There's not one defined culture that Canada has. It's a mix of many different things. Depending on the city, Canada has a Ukrainian, Filipino, German, Irish, French, and lately Indian communities that all bring a little bit of something to the country.
UK, on the other side, has an extensive history of monarchy, Viking and Roman conquest, and a lot of arts. When we spent several weeks in London and Edinburgh, we were nothing but overwhelmed by how much is happening. Musicals, theater, comedy shows, concerts, exhibitions. There are thousands of events happening every night. Toronto and Montreal feel rather uneventful in comparison.
The UK often leans into its rich historical narratives, while Canada embraces a more inclusive approach that reflects its diverse population and progressive thinking.
Socially, some may perceive the UK as more conservative, with a culture that sometimes values tradition over innovation.
Canada, on the other hand, tends to focus on inclusivity and multiculturalism, celebrating progress and various cultures and identities.
This category is really hard to rank because it's so subjective based on your area of interest and value system. For us, both countries get a point here for diversity in culture. But personally, we're gonna give an extra point to the UK for its rich history and strong arts and culture scene.
Social welfare is an important consideration, especially if you have or are planning to start a family.
Both Canada and the UK offer parental leave benefits, with Canada offering up to 18 months of combined parental paid leave for both parents.
In the UK, parental leave is also available for mothers up to 52 weeks, but if you're a father, you only get 1 to 2 weeks.
Another notable thing to mention is the time off mandated by the government. In Canada, the minimum paid vacation time is just 2 weeks, with longer vacation time usually available for highly tenured or senior employees.
UK, similarly to the rest of Europe, values that time off a little more, with a minimum of 28 days of paid vacation. This also includes statutory holidays, whereas in Canada, your statutory holidays are also paid but are not considered part of paid vacation.
Canada typically gets around 10 stat holidays, but the exact number varies by the province.
There are additional welfare programs available in both Canada and the UK, like employment insurance and disability benefits. The conditions and payouts may vary.
From the standpoint of social protections, UK gets a point for everything, while for Canada, we're tempted to only give 2 because it does not get as many vacation days.
Education is another important component you'll consider, both from reputation and cost perspective.
Both Canada and England have excellent education systems, except that the UK maybe has a bit more world-renowned centuries-old universities like Oxford and Cambridge. Canadian universities are just starting to carve out their name in the world, and most notably in medicine, agriculture, and artificial intelligence for now. Not sure how much that matters now, though, in a connected world and also a partially remote world.
Does it matter if you have higher education at all?
Or is it all about skills and experience these days? Let us know what you think.
When it comes to costs, Canada's higher education is definitely lower than the UK. In fact, Canada's higher education is probably the cheapest education among the Commonwealth countries. Perhaps that's exactly why Canada's had over 1 million international students last year, which generated a lot of controversy. In contrast, UK international student volumes in 2023 were just around 800k.
So this is how much a year costs in each country. It's the same number when you look at it at first, but then let's add up the currency signs next to it. That's where you start seeing the difference. Canada gets the points for education, but if you're chasing prestige and quality, you'll probably be tempted to give UK a point.
So that's all the categories we have so far. Did we miss any? Let us know in the comments below. By now, it's probably clear to you that this list is rather subjective. So in the meantime, let's see what our totals are in this battle of Canada versus the UK.
So we're gonna build a table and distribute all the points that we've just talked about.
One goes here, one here, okay.
Okay, so do you want to know the results? If you do, gently tap the like button. That's how YouTube will know that more people should be watching this video. Also, if you're looking for a job in Canada, make sure you subscribe to our weekly newsletter where we share career tips, resources, and job posting from our network.
You can simply scan this gorgeous QR code.
I honestly thought that the numbers would be different.
All right, let's see.
Looks like Canada got 15 points and UK got 13.
I honestly thought that it would be the other way around. I actually rooted for the UK.
I did too. I'm surprised. Looks like Canada is ahead on some of the really important criteria like housing, cost of living, and income. And these are probably the heaviest criteria that you're going to be looking at. Now, we did our evaluation based on average and median numbers, so take these with a grain of salt. Your specific situation might differ depending on your income levels, your family situation, and where you want to live.
But if you're considering immigration, the immigration category will matter to you here as well.
Geography, in our case, includes climate and nature, which I think are rather big considerations for some. But if that doesn't matter to you, then the UK will definitely come up on top here, easily.
The UK is unequivocally leading in culture, city selection, and work-life balance categories. This is indeed the place where you go for history, entertainment, and cultural enrichment. But I wonder if these criteria are important enough for you to perhaps give up on cost of living and income. Let me know in the comments below.
And at the end of the day, none of these rankings matter. Where does your heart feel at home?